guys and gals, and welcome back to another episode of 4th&Baron, where we break down all the hottest stories from around the worlds of sports and esports. I'm Blake.
And I'm Connor.
We've got a great show for you today. Sorry about the break in programming from last week. I'm actually moved into my new apartment. Yeah, starting a whole new adult phase of my life, which is pretty crazy. Sorry you guys don't get a tour, but should be smooth sailing from here on out. What do you think, Connor?
I think we should need a bonus episode sometime in the future in which we just tour your apartment and you tell us all about your new job and new life here in Chicago.
That would be quite a short episode. That would be a very short episode.
Yeah, I mean, they're pretty long normally, so it would be a nice change of pace.
There you go. Well, on today's episode, Steph Curry saves the Warriors, Summoner's Rift claims 4 lives, and we discuss whether Peyton Manning owes the Broncos a decision. But we begin today with a very much needed break of international competition in competitive League of Legends.
Oh, yes.
That's with IEM Katowice coming up just this weekend, actually. So the competing teams in this very much anticipated international spotlight are SKT, Counterlogic Gaming, Royal Never Give Up from China, ESC Ever from Korea, the Chaogu Reapers from China, and then Fnatic and Origin from Europe, and finally TSM from North America. So Connor, that's a whole host of really exciting storylines, considered a lot of top talent from pretty much every major league. Give us the breakdown of what you think is going to happen this week.
Yeah, so in Group A, here we have really just a pretty interesting lineup here. We have ESC Ever, who is a challenger team from Korea that actually won the previous IEM San Jose. Then we have Origin, Royal Never Give Up from the LPL, and of course TSM from North America. So in this, we're going to start with this group here. This is a really interesting group because you have Ever, which is a team that I was really hyped about for a really long time, coming out of Challenger. They are pretty notable for defeating SKT right after they won Worlds in the Kespa Cup, which is a minor Korean tournament that happened on the same Worlds patch, and so you can imagine SKT having just won the biggest championship in the world. We're probably not really too concerned about this small tournament, but this team still defeated them, a team that barely dropped a game through the entire World Championship. And they played really well kind of going into a lot of the other tournaments they played, but really couldn't ever quite get into the Korean regular season. And then now they won this past IEM San Jose. However, since then, they've lost some key players, including their mid laner Athena, to IEM, to IEM Longju, and Incredible Miracle. And so, because of that, this really isn't the same team that came in before. Athena was one of their star players, really, the reason he got picked up elsewhere. And so this team is kind of waning. You have Origin, who we had hyped to be the best team in EU, and is now a very much middle-of-the-pack team. Power of Evil just hasn't been performing, and ever since they replaced, name-changed their AD carry Niels with Sven, who's the same person, but he changed his name, they really just haven't looked the same. Then you have RNG, who are a bottom-of-the-barrel kind of Chinese team that has really been trying to find itself. This team does have Looper and Mata and Insec on its team, with Name as their AD carry. They have on paper, really stacked lineup, but as a team, haven't been kind of working out, very similar to Team OMG in the LPL last season. And so it'll be interesting to see if they bring their A game or just kind of fall off like a lot of the Chinese teams have been doing recently. They also have a 10-man roster at this tournament, so it'll be interesting to see how that kind of turns out. Additionally, and then TSM. And so, if it weren't for really the past couple of weeks, I would say this is TSM's group to lose, actually. Given the lineups that exist, it seems like TSM, at the very least, has a very strong opportunity, and I think that this is going to be really a breakdown between can RNG or TSM realize the potential of their roster. I think those are really what we're going to be looking at in Group A. However, going over to the Group of Death, Group B, you have SK Telecom T1, your world champions, who are actually not bringing Bangi to the tournament. They're bringing their new jungler, Blank. And they are also missing their previous MVP top laner, Marin, who had left to go to LGD at the end of last season. We have Fnatic, who is looking okay, but keep shuffling through supports and are really kind of more of a wild card here. And then you have the real strong, the Chaogu Reapers are a scary, scary team. One of the best Chinese teams. They have Uzi. Ever since they brought in Uzi as their AD carry, have been really dominating through the LPL. And then Counter Logic Gaming, who are coming off looking as one of, if not the best team in North America, which we're going to talk a little bit about in a little bit. And so this is the group where I think you're going to not only see the winner of this tournament, but it's going to be the hardest to predict who is going to come out of this. I think these are all very, very solid teams, and we're going to see some quality games coming out of here. Granted, I've predicted quality games before and not at all been correct, so we'll see how it goes. Blake, how do you see this tournament shaking out?
Well, I think the title of this episode, Bring to Fall the Giants, really says it all, because I think the reigning world champions, SKT, are not going to be the victors in this tournament.
Bold prediction. Well, maybe not.
I think they're going to have a strong showing, but I just look at this, and there are no. This is one of the first IEMs I can remember in quite a while, where just every team, just pound for pound, just bring maybe the best talent from their region. And I'm really not willing to write off any team from this tournament as being a top team come Worlds. So I'm really excited about this. This to me looks like an early MSI, to be honest. So I'm really excited about the level of talent. I think that these are all really hungry teams. I think SKT is looking just the slightest bit shaky from having to reconfigure around Duke in the top lane instead of Marin. Not having an easy Hoon.
Quite shaky, yeah.
To Faker. I mean, obviously, I think they still have some of the best cohesion from an organizational standpoint in the entire world, and that goes a long way. I think Duke has fit quite nicely into the gap that Marin left, but I think that two teams have a great chance to pull this tournament out. I'm predicting either CLG or the Chaogu Reapers to take this tournament. And I've been pretty down and pretty hard on the Chaogu Reapers in the past, particularly their IEM win against Ever. That was IEM San Jose, I believe?
Well, Ever defeated them in the overall tournament, though.
Right. So that series, I was pretty down on the overall level of competition then.
Yeah.
But this, also, as you mentioned, is not going to be the same Ever. That Ever was kind of brought to form on the back of the Athena Ares synergy, I believe, and with Athena gone. Now I believe in Edward Gaming. Clearly that team is very much reeling. That might be the weakest team in this competition, but I think the Chaogu Reapers just have maybe the best team fighting capability in the world. Their 5v5 is just, I mean, to a fault. Actually, they team fight, I think, just as well as anyone in the world. So much so that they're almost a little one note, where it seems like their macro play isn't very good, and they just want to just constantly 5v5 team fight like other Chinese teams we've known in the past. But I'm giving the edge to CLG, partially because, to me, Chinese teams have everything to prove on the international stage now.
Yeah.
With how much they collapsed at Worlds last year, I'm just not ready to really trust any of them to, from an organizational standpoint, from a player standpoint, not just crumble on that international stage when the lights are brightest, when they're outside of, LPL is a crazy region, all right? Just what goes on in that league is just insanity.
It's like they're behind like a big curtain, and like the whole world just kind of has their own meta. We're doing our own thing, and then in China, they're just doing whatever the heck they want.
The meta is different. The schedule is so different. The organizations are different. How players interact is different. So when you step out on the international stage, I think a lot of that challenges a lot of those practices that the LPL teams exhibit. So I'm going to give my edge to CLG. I think that they are the best all-around team, and they have really impressed me in the past couple weeks in the North American LCS. You can say that the level of competition that they've enjoyed in the North American LCS is about to be blown out of the water by this international tournament. But I love the balance that we're seeing. I love their macro-level team play, their willingness to take wins from just sheer rotations, right? They'll win a game just by out-rotating you, and they don't feel the need to be flashy, or like make picks that they just don't need when they can just out-rotate you and take a tower or another objective. But we've also seen them team fight, just straight up 5v5 with the likes of Cloud9, maybe the best team fighting team in North America. So they've really exhibited a nice balance and a willingness to take it game by game and bring a variety of different strats. And I think that's going to net them this tournament.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with as astounding as it is, and how much I think last year very few people would be saying something like this with a lineup like this. But yeah, it looks like CLG are coming out as one of the favorites, even in the LoL Esports power rankings. They are listed number 2 behind SKT, alone in the A tier.
I don't know if they deserve that. Even though I'm picking them win, I don't know if they deserve to be ranked number 2 in the competition.
Number 2 above everyone except for SKT. They are a team that is coming in on some amazing games off their back, but there's some things we need to consider. One is that TSM, if you recall, are the previous, while SKT might be the previous world champions, TSM are the previous IEM Katowice champions coming into this tournament. That was
a very different TSM, though.
A very, very different TSM. It is, at the same time, though, I think it is a team that plays to the ability of whoever they're against and can really show some surprises. I'm not picking them to win it all, though. I think SKT really shows up in these types of events, and more importantly, on the other side of that, why I don't think Counter Logic Gamer is going to win this is because of the same reason that NA went 0-10 in the second week of the World Championship, and that's because CLG have pretty much one style of play that they have really exhibited in all of North America, and they're winning because no one in North America can seem to handle it. That style of play is you really just kind of a 4-1 split push in which Zion Spartan is alone. Xmithy will camp him a little bit, or just by his own prowess, he'll be able to get ahead in lane because he is an amazing player and a very dominant lane force, and just storm down the lane, drawing map pressure away so that CLG can really do whatever they want across the map. This is a one-horse strategy. I really haven't seen anything else from CLG, and back in Worlds, when people would just use Azir Tristana, North America style was pick like Azir Tristana and try to siege and rotate around the map. And when that was the only style they exhibited for a long time while playing in North America as well. And I thought, well, okay, they have this one style, but once the international teams figure that out, they're going to switch styles, right? And that never happened. And they never were able to win another game because everyone kind of figured out the type of game they were playing. And so this is a tournament in which I could see during the group stage people figuring CLG out and leaving them with not a whole lot of options in any kind of best-of series. So it's going to be interesting to see if CLG can adapt. I thought they could before and they couldn't. Let's see if they can prove me wrong. But I think it's going to be hard to beat a team like SKT in this tournament.
Don't get me wrong, it's going to push them to the brink, but I really do think CLG has proven a propensity. I think you're right that the Zion Spartan split push has been a hallmark in every one of those games to some degree. But especially when he's been on a champion like Fiora, or a champion like, I don't know, what else has he played to great success?
Good luck getting Fiora in these games.
Yeah. I think they've shown an astounding 5v5. Like it's just maybe a willingness isn't the right word. They certainly that's not their go-to. But when you press them as Cloud9 did, as Worlds occasionally did, they're really willing to take a 5v5 team fight, and their team coordination is just good enough. I think that puts them on top of North America's team fighting teams as well. But even though that you mentioned that they have maybe one, like I said, hallmark strategy, which is the 4-1 split push, I don't see a team like Chowder Reapers or Ever or even Origin being able to counter that. I mean, I just don't see them being coordinated enough or synergistic enough to really effectively, work around that. Especially this is a much shorter time frame than Worlds. Being able to work around and counter that strategy from a team that executes it so flawlessly. Well, we'll have to see. That's going to be an incredibly exciting, like I said, weekend of international play. I'm super pumped for it.
It's definitely going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's going to be fantastic. But we're going to move now into the NBA, where, much to my dismay, we have a story about the Thunder, my favorite basketball team, being beaten in overtime by this last-second Steph Curry three-point shot. With
what else would it be?
0.6 seconds, the last second of overtime, Steph Curry hit a 36-foot three-point shot to break the tie and lead the Warriors to victory over the Thunder. 121 to 118. Connor, I want to ask you, this was the Thunder had chances to win this game. They were up by as many as 12 in the fourth quarter, but couldn't stop a late Warriors rally and ultimately lost in overtime. So is this loss, you think, more crushing for the Thunder, or you think the win is more invigorating for the Golden State?
I feel like I'm going to go on the side of more crushing for the Thunder. You never like to lose at the last minute to something that's going to send you into overtime. It's especially, it's almost like you'd rather get like completely dominated in a game than almost win and just not make it, because then you're going to keep telling yourself, if you lose by one basket at the last second, there's so many, suddenly every little thing that might have gone wrong in the game becomes worth the entire game, right? Like you're playing this game and you think, oh, if I had just not letting that guy get past me, if I had blocked that shot, if I had made that shot, if I didn't miss that free throw, all these little things that seem inconsequential as the game would have gone on are suddenly so important. And it's a really crushing feeling that, of course, the Thunder are going to have, especially against the Golden State Warriors, who are on this huge surge, losing to almost nobody this season. Beating Steph Curry during this season in general, I feel like would be an enormous boost for a team. So I would almost say that this loss is doubly bad for the Thunder, because not only do they have to face the fact that they almost lost, but looking at it kind of more economically, the kind of opportunity of morale boost was lost, right? It's like it's not that they just like it's not that they just went from like neutral to down. It's like they could have been up and are now very far down, and so that net loss is especially large. And I think I don't see it really like dragging them down through a series of losses. I think that would be a little extreme, but I do think that is something, an opportunity missed that the Thunder definitely didn't want to give up.
Yeah, no, I don't think this win was more invigorating for the Warriors, because they're just still rolling. You know,
it's business as usual.
Expect this from them. Yeah, this is only notable because this is maybe the first or second time that a top 4 team has even challenged them. Right? This is only notable in that they didn't beat them by 20. But the Warriors did what they do, which is just win. They're 53-5 now. They're just playing incredible. But on the Thunder side, I'm with you. This is more crushing. This is devastating for the Thunder.
Yeah.
Because you're looking at this, because the Thunder also played the Warriors back in early February, and they also lost. And so they led in this game by 12 points in the fourth quarter, and you really thought that they had a chance to pull this off. But they ultimately ended up losing. And if you're the Thunder organization and the players on the Thunder, you just gotta say, we are constructed to win the championship right now. You know, Kevin Durant is up for free agency after this year. Russell Westbrook the year after that. So this team is
they're a win now team. Yeah,
maybe going to fall apart very quickly. And they're saying we're going to have to get Golden State in a best of 7 series to get to the finals. And after these 2 games, you're just like, as a Thunder fan and as a Thunder player, you just have to be asking yourself, how is that possibly going to happen? Because everything that needed to go right for the Thunder went right in this game.
Yeah.
So there are a few ways that the Thunder win games, right? That's when either Russell Westbrook, Kevin Durant, or both just go berserk and play the top 5 player that they are.
Yeah.
That they can just play hero ball and just beat most lesser teams. And when one or both are having off nights or mediocre nights, they occasionally every role player on the team just goes berserk, and the bench gives you an incredible amount of points, and you win the game that way. When everyone plays mediocre, or just 1 or 2 role players are giving you good games, the Thunder don't have, that kind of system, like a Spurs system, or like a Heat system, where, coaching can win you games. They just don't win. They aren't structured enough to know how to win those games when, everything isn't lining up. But this is a game where everything was lining up for them. Kevin Durant had 37 points in that game.
Yeah.
Russell Westbrook had 26 points. Serge Ibaka had 20 rebounds in this game. The Thunder out-rebounded the Warriors by 62 to 32. They had almost twice the number of rebounds that Golden State did. And they also played one of their best defensive. The Thunder's big weakness is defense. And as a Thunder fan, it disgusts me. But this is one of their better defensive games, and they let up 121 points.
Yeah.
But, they had, albeit in overtime. But you just look at this and you say, if all this lined up and you still couldn't beat them, how are you going to beat them in 4 games out of 7? you just got to be looking at this and saying, you know, that I don't know if I would call the Thunder a flawed team yet in construction in their DNA. You just have to be looking at this and saying Golden State is just so far ahead of everybody else that we don't even have a chance to get to the finals this year, even though it seems like the team is constructed to win now.
Yeah, I think that's the key here. The key is that it's not that the Thunder are a team that is missing an element, right? It's that when they are firing on all cylinders, they are a championship caliber team. The problem is that there is an even better, more championship caliber team that exists that they're in their division that they're going to have to play against. I mean, Steph Curry had 46 points and broke the 3-point. He broke the record for most 3 points scored in a season in this game, and the season is like 2/3 of the way done. Like that's especially big. It doesn't make any sense. It's Steph Curry this year is playing mind-bogglingly well. Like at the point where it might not even be a debate as to whether or not this is the best season anyone has ever had. Really only a championship victory will I guess silence anyone from that, and even then he's having an amazing season. I mean, this is someone who especially if you're the Thunder now, if you could beat this guy who is just surging through the NBA. I mean, like, it's always insane to me when you see somebody who, like, you think everyone else on the field is the best in the world at what they do, right? There's nobody better than them at what they do, and this one guy is making them all look silly. Like, it is,
and he's 6'2" and like 160 pounds. You know, that's insane.
He's basically you. He's like your size.
Yeah, and he's little compared to those guys. So, but when you're the Thunder and you're thinking, you know, the only thing we could be faulted with is just being just a little bit worse than maybe the best team in the history of the NBA. That feels awful. You know,
right.
You're saying in any other season we would be like maybe the favorites to win this year.
Yeah.
But the Golden State Warriors are playing this year at the level that they are,
and it's just not fair.
I want to say this last thing because
it's like being Pippen on a team with Jordan, right?
Yeah. Your only fault is not being maybe the best that there ever was.
You would have been a superstar otherwise.
Hard to swallow.
Yeah.
But we look at the Warriors, Connor, and I just looked over their schedule, and I've noticed this. I've been paying really close attention to their season, and so they have 5 losses, right? But you know who those losses haven't come against? They haven't come against the Thunder, the Spurs, the Cavs, the Raptors, the Bulls. Those are like the 5 teams that anyone who gives anyone a shot to beat Golden State in a series, it'd be one of those 5 teams. And they haven't lost to any of them.
Yeah.
In fact, they've destroyed all of them. All their losses have been kind of like, you know, oh, we've been on a 6-game road stand and we've dropped one, you know, to Orlando, or, you know, oh, these young guys in Milwaukee just, you know, came out and blitzed us, you know. They haven't dropped a game to one of the teams that we think could actually beat them in a series, and that's terrifying at this point.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder what even, like, if their losses can even be attributed to anything regarding their team, rather than just the fatigue and the inevitability of this many games that you're going to lose some of them, right? Going through an undefeated NBA season just seems impossible, and so you're going to lose some games, but at a certain point, yeah. We talked a little bit before about the Warriors making basketball not fun anymore, and at the very least, in terms of competition, it seems like pre-written. It seems pre-written almost. And it's going to be fun to see if anyone can knock them off, and I think it'll still be fun to see them win, but it's really not looking good for anybody else. Blake, I'm glad we talked about Steph Curry and the Warriors, but I want to talk a little bit about another player who's had a lot of impact on his team. We're going to shift over to Europe, to the EU LCS, and talk about Forgiven on H2K. So Forgiven, this past weekend in the LCS, gave a really tearful interview in which he talked about how he is going to be going into the Greek military and may not be playing professional League of Legends for the foreseeable future. Blake, I want to know what you think about Forgiven's leaving and what the state of H2K would be if he were not able to return to this team. I mean, this is a team that played without Ryu for a little while and ended up getting him back, but and there are people saying that there is hope that he will play for H2K once again. But Forgivenless H2K, do they still hold the dominant position in the EU right now?
I think they do, but I think it could. That only lasts. I'll only say that for the regular season, right? Come playoffs, I think
I completely agree.
H2K would be very vulnerable. I think organizationally, just like you talked about, they've already been able to play around missing a key playmaker from a very key laner in Ryu on their team. Mm-hmm. They've been able to play with a very subpar replacement in Selfie and still perform.
I would disagree that Selfie is subpar. I think he's a fairly good player, but he's no Ryu, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think the gap in skill level, or the differential that they had to accept,
and taking that kind of gap in your mid lane is always pretty difficult.
Yeah, I looked at Selfie. I guess I wasn't disgusted, but I was really unimpressed with things like his Jace.
Not disgusted.
I was just like, man,
Okay.
But I think Forgiven is a different story, because while Ryu is a great mid laner, Forgiven might be. I actually don't think might be. I think is the best AD carry unquestionably in Europe. It has the KDA and CS per minute to prove it.
I don't think there's a whole lot of debate about that. I think Emperor might be the only one in consideration there, but yeah, you're right.
Emperor is having a good split, but that the teams are also a little bit different. But I think H2K is playing with a level of strategic prowess that I think that they can overcome somewhat. Forgiven being gone for a few games. Like I said, in the regular season, and also if they have Ryu, because Odo Omne is still having an incredible split and making a case to also be the best of his lane, the top lane. I think Jankos is having a really kind of a career renaissance and really improving on his last few jungle splits. So I think H2K can survive this for now. But when you start getting into best of fives, I think you really want not just the mechanical prowess, but the emotional presence of Forgiven there, who is a really emotional player, you can just tell is just all in, dedicated to the game, dedicated to winning. I think that absence is more felt during a series as well.
That's an interesting point that I hadn't considered. Yeah, because obviously you're losing the mechanical ability and decision-making ability of probably the best at that position. Is going to hurt your team, of course, but yeah, the emotional part makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's pretty obvious just from his interviews and his history that he is a very emotional player, and yeah, in a series, if you're down a game or if you're up a game, to keep the momentum going or to take it back, like, you do need that guy who's going to be really emotional, who's going to bring kind of the fight to your team, right? Because there's kind of something intangible that comes into playing any kind of competition beyond just kind of raw skill, right? It's a mentality and emotion aspect that really goes undersold, I think, a lot, especially when we talk about League of Legends, because it's not as physical as other sports. I think that is where we get into that's why we don't talk as much about emotion and about how that drive affects somebody. But at the end of the day, these are people playing this competition at the highest level possible in their area, and so that should be expected from these. Yeah.
But Forgiven, on the emotional side, I want to say this: Forgiven isn't a player who tilts. Like, he's not like a Soaz or maybe a Huni, who are also emotional top laners but are prone to tilting. Forgiven doesn't tilt. Forgiven gets angry, and
that's what I mean.
Forgiven gets angry.
Fight.
So like you were talking about, when you're getting down in a series, you want Forgiven on your team. I mean, that game he played, I forget who the opponent was. They won. He was playing Caitlyn, and he gave an interview afterwards where he was, clearly distraught over. He's like, this might be the last game of League of Legends I play for almost a year, which is an eternity for the career of a professional League of Legends player.
Yeah.
And he was, and he was, my mind wasn't in it. I had a bad game. I thought he had a great game on that Caitlyn. It's clear he uses that as emotional fuel, as just fuel for his fire, rather than he doesn't let it overtake him.
Yeah, he wasn't just like sadly listing around on the Rift. You know, he's the guy. That, he gets mad. I think that's a good way to put it.
So, but do you think that they'll still retain the first round bye for the playoffs in the European LCS, even if Forgiven is gone for the rest of the season?
You know, I agree that I think they'll still be a top team in the playoffs, or going into the playoffs rather, and a maybe deeper playoff threat. I don't see them retaining the top spot when they have so many people so close to them in record. If they were as far apart as, say, Immortals at this point, I would say, yeah, they could probably hold it together going into the last kind of 3 weeks of the season. But really, with teams like G2 coming and Unicorns of Love, especially Vitality, right next to them in the standings and looking incredible and not really in danger of losing any of their players. I can see these teams overtaking H2K and defeating them in the playoffs definitely without Forgiven. I do not see Forgiven or a Forgivenless H2K winning this EU LCS at all, especially with Vitality and G2 especially are just surging and the level of competition in EU has gotten very, very high, and you're going to need everything you've got in order to compete, right?
Yeah, I agree. Like I said, I think H2K can kind of struggle to the finish line of the regular season. I think that but like you said, there's so many teams or there's several teams that are so close to them in the standings, be it G2 and Vitality, that it's very possible that they lose their first round bye. I think that if they struggle to the finish line of the regular season like that, they're going to have a hard time getting out of the first round of playoffs for me. So that's what I really want to look for. I think if they finish strong, if they somehow manage to pull it together, finish strong, and keep that first round bye, I think that they're still my favorite to go to the finals. But I just see a greater chance, a greater likelihood of them kind of, slowing down before the end of the race.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Well, you know who's not slowing down before the end of the race is CLG.
No.
A monstrous week, as we alluded to earlier in the NALCS last weekend. They pulled out a 2-0 week with victories over both Immortals and Cloud9, who were considered the number 1 and number 2 teams respectively in NA. So, but also, the flip side of that coin is that Immortals suffered their first loss at the hands of CLG.
Bring to fall the Giants.
There you go. It's proving that they were, that they bleed too. Which some people had questioned. Some people were saying, I don't know if including you, but that they would have the perfect season.
Yeah, one of my bold predictions from so long ago was that they were going to go undefeated this season, and I was so close.
Well, you were a lot more right than I was, who had at some point predicted that they would go 0-2 in week 2 of the split. That definitely didn't happen. But Connor, I want to ask you, what do you think was the more significant occurrence in the NALCS? Was it CLG getting these 2 monstrous wins, or was it Immortals earning their first loss?
I'm going to go ahead and say, for similar reasons actually that I was talking about, the Thunder losing being more significant, I think CLG winning is more significant. Oh. And there's a couple things behind that. One is that CLG came into an incredibly tough week in which it would be very easy to expect them to go 0-2. And they came out and played out of their minds. Insanely entertaining games, very back and forth, very high-level macro play, very mechanically intensive team fighting. And CLG was firing on all cylinders and proved that when that happens, they can win games against anyone. Beating Immortals illustrated that they are in contention, and if not clearly the top team in North America. One game, of course, isn't going to prove anything definitively, but CLG still has some questions in the names of like their very brutal loss to TSM just a couple of weeks back. But what we really have to look at, though, is that CLG came out and beat both of these really strong teams. While on the other hand, Immortals, yes, they were 1 game off from taking the from beating the regular season North American win streak record. Huni and Rainover's, I think, 36-0 streak at that point, something like that, of regular season games without a loss was broken, unfortunately. But
It's incredible.
It's an incredible streak, and the fact that it ended, I just don't see streaks ending as being that significant because all streaks must end. You can't win all the time, and given the level of talent in NA, I think it was going to be inevitable that this team, while I did predict them to go 18-0 and just keep going off their momentum, I think it makes sense that eventually the teams kind of figured them out. Their style is very much a kind of dominate lane and just kind of overtake you with team fighting and the superior mechanics style of play, and that I think is a very beatable style once teams figure out kind of where they're going and can really overtake them in lane. It was the lane dominance and presence, I think, early game that really gave CLG the edge they needed to win this. And I mean, it also required a Baron steal from McSmithy at the very end, and some other factors. So it was by no means an easy win for them. But what I think the most important part as to why I don't think this is a big deal is because of the following game Immortals played against Echo Fox.
Yeah.
Echo Fox, a very much surging team, despite losing to TSM, they were pretty much 4-2, like almost undefeated with Frog in their lineup, win streaking, looking really strong, and looking like a team that could take a game off of anyone. And if Immortals, and I think one of the big fears about Immortals going in is that if they lost, they would lose hard. They would go on tilt, and this was a team that just wasn't going to work together. Immortals came around and proved in a very dominant game over Echo Fox the next day, after losing to CLG, that they are not going to let one loss get to them, and they are going to be consistent over top teams. The past couple weeks, they've looked a little shaky against teams, and I think it's because of their win streak, honestly. Now that they've lost, it's just one of those things where once you lose a game, you stop thinking about the pressure of having to keep winning your games, right? It doesn't matter anymore, and they can focus on what matters. And so CLG winning, so them losing a game isn't a big deal, while CLG winning is huge. It pushes them up into the standings for sole possession of second place, because the first round bye, I think, in NA is going to mean a whole lot.
Yeah, I totally agree. But for some of the reasons that you mentioned, I'm actually going to say that the Immortals loss was the more significant thing that happened. And I feel like I've taken this stance in the past where it's not because I think that Immortals are a weaker team for it. I think Immortals are a stronger team for having this loss.
It's the same Panthers argument from earlier this year.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And they didn't win in the end.
No, but that was for a lot of different reasons. The Immortals,
look at the Baron.
Like you talked about, that pressure of having the unbeaten season or the longest win streak in North America, or Huni and Rainover's unbeaten regular season streak, all of that is over now. We don't have to worry about that anymore. So that's a monkey off their backs. They've also disproven, like you said, the notion that they're going to tilt hard, that they're going to go, that when someone finds the chink in their armor, that they're going to exploit it to the full. They turned right around and said to Echo Fox the next day, don't nobody go thinking that we're vulnerable right now, because we'll just crush you. I mean, and Echo Fox, like you said, was a surging team, so I think that was an impressive win that people will overlook. And they're saying, look, you still are not on our level. The loss also, just like you mentioned, first round bye, going to be probably pretty important to the North American LCS.
Yeah.
They're not losing that first round bye. They're way too far ahead in the standing. So all the loss did, I think, is crucially refocus them and got them. My most important point is it moved them away from some of this predictability that had crept in on their play style. I hope this loss serves to teach Huni, do not ever play Quinn again in the North American LCS. I hate it. I hate this pick. It does nothing. And sponsors tried to play it, and various other.
A lot of people played it into Malphite, which isn't really fair.
Which is just a head scratcher. But some of them did that willingly, Connor. They just blind picked a Quinn, and they on the last rotation, and they let the other team counterpick their top lane. And I'm just like, what are you expecting will happen? Quinn, to me, brings almost nothing to the table, and Huni had opted into it a lot of times, and for his part, did his best to be a distraction and annoying, and even though he had given up 3 kills or something, he was 0-3 or something like that in these games, he was still managed to be relevant. Props to him, because he's a great top laner. But we saw, and then also, similar in the mid lane, Pobolter was pretty content to just whip out that Lux as the kind of this, hey, I'm the only one playing this in North America, isn't this cool? And it was okay, but the next game we saw finally broke the mold. Huni broke out the Pantheon, which is kind of this new pick, and Pobelter broke out the Syndra, and they went 606 on Pantheon and 404 on Syndra, and I think that's a great sign of saying.
And Adrian still played Soraka.
Well, yeah, that's something that is definitely working, and so I think that although that might be the next kind of element of staleness that creeps into their game, but they broke this, I think, trend of predictability, which was going to inevitably happen, and that it finally happened towards the end of the split, I think is a great sign for the Immortals rest of the season.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I feel like with all of what that win means for CLG, though, and on top of the win over C9 as well, and given that Immortals, that the loss isn't going to deter them, so what you're saying is that the Immortals losing is more significant because the loss is going to empower them, right? But like they were already like really good before, and like seeming unbeatable and really hard to beat. Like I don't know. To me, it seems like the status quo is most significantly different because of the CLG wins rather than the Immortal losses. That's why I see it as more important.
I will say these are two huge wins, just like you were saying, for CLG.
Yeah.
And if CLG go on to kind of carry this momentum and roll it through and win IEM Katowice, I think that we're going to look back at this week as the turning point in the NALCS, when CLG took off and became the dominant team in North America again. I'm with you there. If that doesn't happen, I think that momentum that they just worked so hard to build is going to roll back a little bit. But you got to remember, that Immortal CLG game was really close.
Yeah, it was.
And it was one. CLG lost a couple thousand gold lead. They had like a 2,000 or 3,000 gold lead at 12 minutes, and they lost it. So Immortals, even like I said, being predictable, even not playing, maybe playing with a monkey on their back, even when the streaks had to end,
Quinn's back.
Yeah, goodness gracious, they still made it really interesting. So it's not like CLG just beat them down and ran them out of the building. But there are, I will concede to you, I think there are scenarios, particularly if CLG wins IEM Katowice, that this will look back and say this weekend or last weekend was more important for CLG. But right now, I think it's definitely Immortals.
Yeah, I do definitely see your point, Blake. I think that makes a lot of sense. Moving on, though, we're going to shift gears back over to the NFL and talk about a previous championship team that is undergoing, maybe drama is not the right word, but there's definitely some questions being raised with the Denver Broncos right now. Potential for drama. I think that's good. So essentially, Brock Osweiler's contract decision is going to be coming up very soon. And Peyton Manning has still not publicly disclosed, or really privately even, that whether or not he is going to retire for the season, and if so, if he's going to be staying, if not, rather, if he's going to be staying with Denver. And Blake, what I want to know here in this situation is, you do have Super Bowl champions. Coming off a Super Bowl championship, you have your star quarterback who's really not looking like a star anymore and probably should retire. Meanwhile, you have your up-and-coming guy who helped you through quite a few games, including a win over the Patriots. Do the Broncos owe it to Brock Osweiler? And more importantly, does Peyton Manning owe it to the Broncos to make his decision earlier for the sake of the Broncos keeping this quarterback that they've supposedly been holding in development, studying under Peyton Manning to succeed him and really just kind of own the franchise? The story going kind of into this seemed like that Brock Osweiler was going to be the new guy for the Broncos going forward. And Peyton Manning seems to be kind of, through his lack of decision and lack of action, is throwing a little bit of a wrench into this situation.
Yeah, I think this is a super interesting story, and I think it's important to highlight some of the dates here, like you mentioned. Mm-hmm. So Brock Osweiler's contract is over on March 7th, but Peyton Manning, his contract lasts until March 9th, and that's when he has to make a decision for renewal. So he could potentially hold out and let Brock Osweiler kind of twist in the wind, or rather let kind of force the Broncos to give up on Brock Osweiler. They've gone and publicly and told Brock Osweiler and his agent that they are freezing negotiations with him until they know what Peyton Manning's decision will be for next year. So But getting to the question you asked, does Peyton Manning owe it to the Broncos organization for an early decision, or to just at least privately let them know which way he's going so they can get on with constructing their team and potentially signing Brock Osweiler? Normally, I would say that no. As a player, you don't owe the organization anything, particularly because from an organizational standpoint, when organizations have a conflict or have a problem with a player's contract, they can come to them and they can restructure that deal. They can cut them. They can trade them.
That's a good point. The NFL Players Association exists for a reason.
Yeah, there's very little loyalty that exists, between from brand or from organization coming down to player. Yeah, contracts are not guaranteed in the NFL. So normally, I would say that the player, when the tables are turned, does not owe the NFL, does not owe the organization anything. But in this case, it just feels like Peyton Manning kind of owes John Elway and the Broncos a Super Bowl. Like he kind of owes them for giving him a Super Bowl. Because even though I think he was good enough to win the Super Bowl, he played very well. He managed that game, big deal with no turnovers, and also through the playoffs. It's very clear that John Elway and the Broncos, were constructed around Peyton Manning and to give Peyton Manning that final shot at a Super Bowl that he just couldn't have carried the team to on his own like he had in previous years. So on virtue of that alone, despite not even going back to the fact that they kind of took it, they were kind of one of the only teams that wanted to take a chance on him after those 4 neck surgeries and when he got kicked out of Indianapolis. The Broncos were there to pick him up and to give him a vote of confidence and put him in on their organization. That's kind of a vote where you're in their favor, where you're kind of like you kind of owe them a little something. I think Peyton Manning does owe them the courtesy of getting their decision at least a few days before with their deadlines with Brock Osweiler, so they can secure their future.
This is interesting. I have a concurrent opinion with you, which means I agree with you, but for very different reasons.
Interesting. I'd love to hear what that is.
I actually kind of disagree with your reasoning, in fact, in that you're saying that Peyton Manning, I guess, it was like the Broncos did him a favor by granting him a Super Bowl. Winning a Super Bowl is not something that you can just do for somebody, right? Going back a couple of years, Peyton Manning had a couple of neck surgeries, right? He was definitely a risk to take on as a free agent, but that does not mean at all that Peyton Manning was not the biggest free agent to potentially ever hit that market, right? There were several teams who wanted Peyton Manning on their team. It was not like the Broncos picked up this old charity case. They were picking up a legendary Hall of Fame quarterback who's the very next year more than returned on his investment and finally absolutely. Paid off with the championship. But see, the thing is, there
were a lot of people, Connor, maybe the majority of people, who were questioning whether he would ever even play a snap of football again. Seriously, there were a lot of people about that.
But he silenced those critics almost immediately. I think that.
Well, that's right, but that's after a team took a chance on him. I think the Broncos. You can't underestimate what the Broncos kind of went out on a limb and did.
I see it as a very it's a chance that I think many people would easily take. I think it's really good odds to take an amazing player who's, like we've said before, he's not the guy you take for his athleticism. He's not the guy who's going to be slowed down by these types of surgeries as much as, say, like an Adrian Peterson or a Cam Newton type of player.
With 4 neck surgeries, it's not about being slowed down. It's can you survive a single tackle in the National Football League?
I mean, we're acting like his. I feel like we're doing a little bit of disservice to the medical industry by acting like his neck was just going to snap off just because of the fact that he had surgery.
I didn't know.
We didn't know, but the thing is that they obviously would have tested him to see whether or not he was capable of playing. The thing is that you can't say, just because of how contrapositives work, you can't say that the Broncos would have won the Super Bowl even without Peyton Manning. Looking at the stats, you might be able to make the argument that he didn't provide a lot of offensive capabilities there, but he's still that game manager. He's still the guy changing plays. He's still the guy that knows how to work the clock. He's still that smart guy that's going to be there. And so you can't really make that argument that they would have won without them. And I don't think, and winning a Super Bowl is great for a player, but it's amazing for an organization. It's the one thing you're trying to do all the time. It is, I don't think Peyton Manning winning a Super Bowl with a team means that he owes the team anything. I think, if anything, you could almost consider it to be the other way around. He obviously didn't give an MVP performance, and this probably doesn't deserve too much from the team. I mean, he doesn't deserve like an enormous new contract, I think. But at the same time, I don't see that as a reason for him to owe the Broncos anything. At the same time, though, there's just something about this situation that just feels wrong to me. It feels like it would be just, and maybe this is going into how we see Peyton Manning's kind of good guy, prince of football image kind of breaking up. It just seems like this would be the, Peyton Manning doesn't, I think, owe it to the Broncos at all. I think he owes it to Brock Osweiler to do this. If this is the guy that's been studying under him this whole time, why would you screw him over by waiting like an extra day on this decision? This is not a decision in which one additional day is going to make a difference. This is your entire career. This is something you've been thinking about for years. You owe it to Brock Osweiler, the guy who was painted to be your successor, to give him the reins and say, this is your franchise now. It's your turn to shine. I'm going to ride off into the sunset in my perfect victory. Like, why would he ruin it for this guy, for this new up-and-coming quarterback, just so that he could play one more, potentially even more mediocre season, right? It just doesn't seem right to me. And so I don't think he owes it to the Broncos necessarily, but I think he definitely owes it to Brock Osweiler.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and look, I understand it from his point of view. You know, he's been playing for, 20 years now? It's when you're faced with hanging up that jersey for the last time, you just don't want to do it. Yeah, and I think
especially when you're like you're an emotional player, right? You're fiercely competing at the top level.
Yeah, and like we were talking about with Forgiven, you know, you just have to be emotional and all in and invested to compete at the level which Peyton Manning has consistently competed. And I think there's a level of irrationality to that, right? That irrationality is essential to being the kind of competitor that Peyton Manning was, but is also kind of getting in the way of him making, I think, the objectively right decision right now, which is to retire. And I can understand that. I can understand that.
Yeah, I guess I can too. I guess it's easy to get caught up in the fact that, like, oh, it's the storybook ending. He should definitely retire. He didn't have a good season. But, like, you could say he didn't have a good season. He won the Super Bowl. Like, that's like the, okay, like, you can say whatever you want about his stats, about how he played. But at the end of the day,
17 interceptions all the regular season.
But see, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. None of it matters because they won, right? They won. They're the winners. They're the best. His team won the Super Bowl, but he won. Right. And if you're an athlete at the top, that's all that matters. You won. That's it.
I gotta press you on this, Connor. So you think that if the Broncos, if when Peyton Manning was kicked out the back door by the Indianapolis Colts, right, unceremoniously just rejected by them, which I think was an incredibly classless move on their part.
Yeah.
If any other organization except the Broncos, but the Broncos, picks up Peyton Manning, does he win a Super Bowl in the next 4 years? For the rest of his career, does he win a Super Bowl? I think the answer is objectively no.
I don't think so at all.
I think it's simply
because,
no.
Okay, you look at this past season, probably not this past year's Peyton Manning, but 2013 Peyton Manning on a team with a good defense, he was a monster that year.
He also had an incredible receiving corps surrounding him.
He did, but Peyton Manning is to a degree the same type. I mean, you look at this Indianapolis Colts team he played with for a really long time, and he's a guy like Tom Brady who makes any receiver who elevates them to another level. I mean, you look at the Broncos. You say they have an amazing receiving corps with people like Demaryius Thomas, but he made guys like Emmanuel Sanders, Julius Thomas, like these guys who nobody was really expecting too much out of, or at least not like the level that they produced when they were on his team. He had an effect on his team that raised everyone to the next level. And so if you have a team that with a slightly different makeup than that glass cannon Denver Broncos that existed then, I mean they were outscoring. I mean you could almost argue they had like too much offense. Like they had the most points scored per game by more than 10 up from the next highest team for the entire season in 2013. And so that, like, you can't tell me that he wouldn't have maybe won with another team? Like, I don't think, at the very least, it is not a resounding no to that question.
I honestly don't think he does. I don't know. I mean, you say that a lot of other teams that you think were willing to take a chance on him after that. I don't really know what organizations you're talking about to put that. It seems like it would be some of the more desperate organizations that would be more willing to take a chance on him. But you made the Tom Brady comparison. But unlike Tom Brady, the Denver Broncos drafted Peyton Manning or traded Peyton Manning everything he could ever want on that team, right? They gave him running games. They gave him offensive weapons when he wanted them. They gave him a solid defense. It's going to, they gave him a punter.
They didn't give him a solid defense until like 2 years after he was drafted.
They gave him a solid defense this year, which is the year that they won the Super Bowl.
They gave it to him this year, yeah. But you can't say like.
I'm not saying he didn't contribute. But I'm saying, look, Peyton Manning just doesn't go and win the Super Bowl. Peyton Manning didn't have 20% to contribute to the Super Bowl.
You're making the argument, though, that the logical conclusion of what you're saying is that literally anyone on this Broncos team would have won the Super Bowl this year.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Okay, exactly. But then how are you saying that they gifted him the Super Bowl? It's not like he did. He contributed to this team, and it's not like this Broncos team was going to win no matter what, right? Like, this was a team in which a lot of things had to come together, and they did have the best defense in the league.
Nothing was guaranteed. But look, if Peyton Manning was playing for the Jets, right? They were a playoff contender team. They were 10-6.
They were, yeah. They were a good-looking team.
Do you think they win the Super Bowl this year?
No, I don't think they win the Super Bowl with Peyton Manning.
They just don't. They just don't.
But
so if you put Peyton Manning on the Panthers, do they have a shot? Also, I don't know.
I think they probably could.
Maybe, but
on the Panthers, yeah. On the Cardinals, they probably would have. On the Seahawks, he would have.
When you're Peyton Manning, you just understand that this team, that John Elway and the Broncos did right by you, and that's
definitely true.
At the very least, they gave you the pieces, which they didn't have to do, by the way. That they gave you the pieces.
Okay, that part right there is
to win a Super Bowl.
What you just said is the part that I have the biggest problem with in your argument. They didn't have to do. They didn't have to give you the pieces. Like, that makes no sense to me because these are the pieces that allow you to win a Super Bowl. In what if you in front of you are saying these pieces could help us win the Super Bowl? Why would any team say no? We don't want that. Like,
you would be absolutely surprised because I really do not want to underestimate what a good GM and a good president of football operations will do for a franchise, because Tom Brady hasn't been drafted an offensive weapon for maybe the entirety of his career. They only once went out and got Randy Moss, and that has been it. He has had to make do with just whatever scraps has been thrown his way. And as a Patriots fan, that sucks. When you have to say that they just,
but that's because Bill Belichick knows
we are not going to give you what you ask for and what you request and what you think you need, and you just have to deal with it. And that there are a lot of teams that really do that don't shore up the areas in which that they need to be a contender.
But you could argue that's just poor management. The fact that the Broncos had good management, drafted well, and constructed a good team has nothing to do with them gifting Peyton Manning a Super Bowl. It's not like Peyton Manning is the only guy that benefited from the Super Bowl. The entire Broncos organization has benefited immensely.
Did they have a lot to do with it?
Of course, they're the whole organization. They're the whole team. No one person wins a Super Bowl.
The majority to do it.
Of course,
vast majority to do with that Super Bowl.
It's very rare that only one person would have a majority.
No, I think the quarterback can. I think the quarterback can absolutely have maybe even a majority impact. But
look, it can be.
If you're Peyton Manning, are you saying I'm glad that I went out and won this Super Bowl this year? I think I'm thanking my lucky stars that I was on a team that was as quality as the Broncos, and that's from a player standpoint up to and especially including an organizational standpoint.
I think you are, but I think as Peyton Manning, you're a guy with such a high competitive drive that you are thinking to yourself that you definitely had an impact on them winning this, that this was your contribution as well, that you earned a second Super Bowl ring, right? You probably know as Peyton Manning, I had a lot of help to get here with the rest of my team, and you could very much be appreciative of that. But I don't think that winning a Super Bowl means a player has to owe their organization anything. if they won it for him, because everybody wins the Super Bowl together on this team. And if anything, an organization overall benefits way more than the players, because winning a Super Bowl is going to increase your ticket prices, is going to increase the amount of fans you're going to have in the very following year. You're going to earn so much more money than however much your players are going to be earning in this next season.
But look, context matters, and you alluded this to yourself earlier in your argument when you were saying this is a pretty trivial matter. I'm not saying that Peyton Manning owes them a lot. I'm saying Peyton Manning owes them a day or two on his decision for whether he's going to keep playing or not. He owes them that.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. But what I'm saying is that the onus is not to the Broncos. I'm saying it's to Brock Osweiler. This is all I'm saying. Is that it should be shifted more. I'm just disagreeing with a fundamental part of your argument. I think you're right. It's not a big thing.
There's fair points you can make about that. There's fair points you can make. I'm willing to hear that about Brock Osweiler.
Okay. And you could say, as Brock Osweiler as part of the Broncos organization, like them together, potentially, is who Peyton Manning should be owning this. Regardless, at least we both agree that Peyton should come up with a decision sometime in the next week.
Yeah, and he should, and I think it's, when you take a step back, I really, really still hope he retires.
I mean, I've been hearing a lot of reports that he could go to the LA Rams, so maybe it's time for you to become a fan of them again.
Well, he could stand to learn a thing or two from King Colton. But we're gonna break from our. That was a great discussion. I'm really glad that we got to have that.
Yeah.
It seems like we've been agreeing far too much in this episode.
Yeah, we really have. I mean, it's because we're both right most of the time, I guess. So
you're absolutely.
You can't really help it.
But hopefully we're gonna, not necessarily come up with the same words in this next segment, which, as I've just alluded to, is going to be a "What's the Word" segment. Where we, again, try and frame up this one subject or topic in just one word and kind of frame the narrative in our own little way. So, Connor, I'm going to give you a few topics, and I want you to give me one word to describe them. So the first one is RG3, Robert Griffin III, former quarterback for the Washington Redskins, being formally let go by president of football operations there. So, they say, quote, that we think he'll find an opportunity elsewhere, and we wish him the best. Connor, what's your word for this parting of ways?
All right, Blake, my word is finally. And you have to say it just like how I just did, because, Blake, RG3 has been, in my opinion, maybe an anchor isn't quite the right word, but he has been definitely a toll on this Redskins team. He's been eating up salary money. He's been injured for many seasons, playing very, very few games in the past few seasons. The most I think he played was in his rookie season, in which he did play well, but then ever since then, just his body just didn't seem to be built to be able to handle the level of pro play transitioning directly from college, which happens to a lot of rookies. That's why you don't see a whole lot of Heisman winners actually doing too well in the NFL usually. And so with how well Kirk Cousins played with the Redskins this year, really just turning them into a good playoff caliber team, and leading them to some really high-scoring games, a high-powered offense. If you have a quarterback like that, you really don't need RG3 sitting there on your team. He could probably do things elsewhere, and you've just had such a bad time with him just not being able to play. And he's been worse than Derrick Rose out there, which is saying a lot. And he is, like, I just think I'm so happy finally this Redskins team doesn't have to be kind of brought down by RG3 being there.
But you're happy on the behalf of the Redskins. You're not so happy as much about RG3 being let go.
No, I still have many concerns about RG3 going forward as a player.
Okay, well, my word is mutually beneficial, and that's because I think this is
it's
just
2 words.
Exactly. I think it's hyphenated, right? You can
fine.
maybe legitly hyphenate that, but with parties here, it's just the absolute right move, because just like you mentioned, RG3 was just sitting on the bench. It's just a bad look for the Redskins. It's gotta feel bad for that team, right? When you know how much they traded just to be able to go up to move up in the draft and snag him at number 1.
They gave him so much.
Yeah. So that's just like, that's got to feel bad watching that guy sit on the bench just so he can avoid injury, so you can save yourself all that money that would happen if he had been injured this season. And so now they can also fully commit to Kirk Cousins. I think that's going to feel good for him, where he doesn't have to keep looking over his shoulder at this RG3 guy sitting there and wondering what they're going to do with him. And on the RG3 side, just being able to break with Jay Gruden, a coach that had clearly just had no confidence in
given
him.
Up on you.
He had really given up, maybe for good reason. We're going to find out. But I think just the fact that now you get a clean slate, a fresh start. He's also been kicked around as possible for the LA Rams. So. And maybe even in Dallas. So we'll see where he goes.
Dallas, I've heard, especially with what's happening with Manziel.
Yeah, and all that stuff. I think he'd be a better fit in Dallas than he would be in LA. But and like you mentioned, he does have I have a lot of question marks about his game. First and foremost is, can he stay healthy? But also, does he want to be a pocket passer? Does he want to be a runner? I think there's a conflict of identity here that can hopefully be resolved with, like I said, a clean slate. So mutually beneficial. It's about time that this happened. The next thing I want to roll to is in the Dignitas Renegades game for the North American LCS.
This is the best.
There were 4 total, count them, 1, 2, 3, 4 executes in this game, all within the first, I think, like 8 minutes of this game. Mm-hmm. Two on the side of Renegades and 2 on the side of Dignitas. Connor, what's your word for this absolute travesty?
All right, Blake. I'm going to use your 2-word thing from last time and give 2 words for this. This is clown fiesta are my 2 words breaking here. A little context on both of these things. For those who don't know, being executed in the League of Legends is when you die in which no opponent has touched you. You were killed by either a turret or a minion in the environment. In this case, during a lane swap, 2 teammates, 2 people on one team were killed by the turret while failing to have a proper minion wave, kind of shuffling in to take it. 2 other teammates were killed trying to take an early objective called the Rift Herald. They're just killed by the Rift Herald early on, which is just something you really should never, ever see at the professional level. And the term clown fiesta has been thrown around a lot on Reddit about games that have a lot of kills or games that seem really disorganized between teams that just don't look like they know what they're doing. And that absolutely is what happened during this game. I think it was, unfortunately, this could have been a game in the play, I think, if we had done that segment too.
Oh my gosh.
Because these are 2... Dignitas did have a win over TSM last week, but these are 2 very much bottom-of-the-barrel teams in North America who really showed why during this game, in which it's one thing for players to be executed on one team, right? But for the same amount turned back on the other side, I don't think 4 players have ever been executed, or anyone has ever been there have ever been more than 2 executes in any professional game ever up until this point. So clown fiesta is how I'm going to describe it.
Yeah, that's for all those reasons you said. That's why this is humiliating. Humiliating is my word, because it just shows this complete absence of fundamentals that you see in maybe every other professional league player out there. It just seemingly vanished during this game.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, it was just during a lane swap when they were trying to take a turret. Maybe the most standard.
It's the most basic strategy in any League of Legends game this season. And in other seasons.
They failed to have a minion wave, and it's not that, one person died here, and then a few minutes later one person died here. Two of the 3 people trying to take that turret were executed by that turret trying to take it. And they both looked rather confused, like they didn't know whether they should take one more turret shot or not. That was just bad. And then on the other side, for Renegades, trying to take the Rift Herald, it's just... The Rift Herald is if nothing else, the Rift Herald is predictable. It doesn't have a complex attack pattern. Doesn't have a complex.
It has an eye that opens up at the back. That's its weak point.
Yeah, when the casters compare the Rift Herald to a Dark Souls boss, you know that you have done something completely and utterly wrong. So this is just humiliating, and that game was just a clown fiesta times 10. That was crazy. So kind of the last one I want to give you is a little Hearthstone news that we're going to sprinkle in here at the very end. A hunter deck, a new hunter deck, has recently reached rank 1 on the EU Legend ladder, and it's a deck based around the Desert Camel. It's a 3-mana 2/4 that when it's played, it puts a 1-mana card from each deck into play. So it's based around playing Web Spinner, which is a very high value 1-mana card in Hunter, but also the Injured Kraldir, which is a 1 mana 2/4 that if you played it from your hand, would be much worse. But with the Desert Camel is conceivably a little bit better. Connor, what's your word for this new kind of deck? Maybe catching on.
Blake, the word I'm going to use is tantalizing. First of all, some context on the injured Cavaldir. He's a 1 mana 2/4 whose battle cry is to deal 3 damage to this minion. So he's like a baby injured Blade Master that is a 2/1 if you play him from your hand. But if he's summoned from a Desert Camel, it's essentially for 3 mana you're playing 2 2/4 minions, which is incredibly high value, very high tempo. This deck plays a lot, from what I've seen so far, it plays a lot like a zoo, and so it makes sense. It was praised by Reynad recently, and I am someone who has been trying to make a Reno Hunter work for a while. I'm trying to do something a little bit different for mid-range Hunter. I played Desert Camel in a lot of these decks, trying to figure out how I could make a competitively viable alternative Hunter build from what was already out there. And this deck, not using secrets, is especially tantalizing because of not only is it exactly what I want to be playing right now, but it makes use of very, very few cards from it makes use of very few cards from the Curse of Naxxramas and from Goblins versus Gnomes. They're all cards that could be easily swapped out to make this deck still play about the same. And as a result, this deck would be potentially viable in the standard format once it comes out later this year.
And Connor, that's why my word is going to be foresight. I think that whoever developed this deck had a very sufficient amount of foresight.
Look at that layup there, or alley-oop.
Yeah, you covered you hit the nail on the head right before I did, which is that this deck particularly does it's most significant in that it doesn't run any secrets. It's a very minion heavy deck. So, you like to keep a very consistent level of pressure up and not draw these dead hands where you get secrets before your mad scientist or things like that. So that I think there's still challenges, right? You're still going to lose your web spinner, still going to lose your Glaive Zuka. But I think the core of this deck can maybe, transition into the next competitive phase of Hearthstone, depending on whatever one drops we might get in the next expansion.
Yeah, that's for sure. So it's a very special thank you to Jackie Chan's for the.
That's what it was. Yeah, that's what
Jackie
it was.
Chan is his name with a 4 for the A, and Jackie for creating this deck. Not the actual Jackie Chan though. That would be really cool. So
I guess
now,
we don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we really don't. I don't know why he'd be in EU though. So Blake, we are moving on from that segment into, of course, the last part of our show, and that is bold predictions.
That's right.
We've had a lot of our own bold predictions foiled along the way. And Blake, your earlier, probably I think first ever bold prediction that TSM was going to win the spring split is starting to look a little bad, actually. It looked really good in the beginning, and now it isn't looking so hot. So Blake, what bold prediction, you already talked about CLG winning IEM, but what bold prediction can you bring in for this show?
Right, I think the CLG one is bold enough as it is, but I'm actually gonna, I'm not gonna cheat out that way, and I'm gonna make a legit just bold prediction for the show, and that is that I think Peyton Manning is not going to retire and is going to play, rather is going to attempt to play football next season. And I don't want this to happen. I really think that he needs to go out with this storybook ending, go out on top. He has absolutely nothing left to prove or really to gain by playing football anymore. But this Connor is just getting the feel to me of someone who's really dragging his heels, that really just doesn't feel like it's time for him to transition to that next part of his life.
Yeah.
And can I really fault him for that? Can I really fault him for, not wanting to play golf for the rest of his life? I can't fault him for that. Wish he would leave, but it's getting that smell to me that he's gonna try and play somewhere else.
Yeah, I guess I could see that prediction going forward. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I think.
And by the way, if he tries to come back, I don't think that the Broncos are going to sign him. I think they're just going to be like, I think John Elway's going to sit down with him and be like,
Peyton, it's over.
It's over, man. And if you don't want to recognize that it's over, that's your decision. But look, we are trying to move on into the future.
Yeah, I like that prediction. I think it's just bold enough. You've been dragging your feet a little bit yourself, and so thanks for coming back into the playing field, Blake. I am going to go. I'm going to do. I kind of two different ones competing in my head. I'll go with the football one, actually, just to keep in line with you, and to keep in line with something we said earlier. I've been harping a lot on RG3. I still don't think much of him as a player, or in terms of his transition into the NFL. Having said that, I think that for the sake of a bold prediction, I'm going to say that RG3 is going to be, if he is able to get a starting quarterback job next season, that his team is going to, if not make the playoffs, at least be over 500.
Okay. Yeah, I'd say that's definitely a bold prediction considering some of the teams that he's projected to land with.
Yeah, I think that with those teams, I think that RG3, and this is predicated on, while I don't think RG3 is quite suited for the pros, if he could figure out how to change that style, do kind of what Cam Newton has done, do the opposite of what Tim Tebow did, and adapt into kind of the professional metagame, that he could be a top caliber quarterback, definitely.
Yeah, I'm with you.
All right, well, this has been 4th&Baron, Bring to Fall the Giants. Thank you all for listening. Feel free to, of course, hit us up on Facebook, Twitter, whatever, with your comments. Share the video. Hope you all enjoyed the show, and have a good night. Thank you.
Take care, guys.